Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved. Third item is the mission statement for fiscal year 2017 and fiscal policy, which Elizabeth Holub, the finance director, will present.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we begin the budget process for fiscal year 2017, two of the first things we do with the Finance Committee is affirm the mission statement as well as the fiscal policy. The fiscal policy sets the framework within which we operate throughout the budget process. And so we do review that for potential revisions every year. So both documents were included in your packet. No changes to the mission statement are proposed. That's on page 6 of your packet. That mission statement was revised in 2013 and affirmed in 2014. So we're just wanting to make sure that the committee remains comfortable with that.
Any comments, suggestions on the mission statement? We made some grammatical changes a couple of years ago. I think it's pretty much been stable. So should we take a vote to affirm the mission statement? I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All in favor of affirming the mission statement, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the mission statement is hereby affirmed with no changes from last year. And now we will talk about the 2017 fiscal policy.
Right, thank you. The proposed revisions begin on page 7. The document is included in red line format, so you can easily see the proposed revisions. We have a few of them offered this year for the committee's consideration. The first is page 2 of the policy statement, and that relates to the Property Tax Extension Limitation Act, and offers a suggested revision consistent with the revised ordinance that was approved by the City Council in December 2013. The second is on page 3 of the fiscal policy under personnel, and it simply separates the pension funding policy from the policy for other post-employment benefits. The city will have a new GASB pronouncement in fiscal year 2019 that will begin to change the way we report and disclose the other post-employment benefit obligations. And so we've suggested a revision setting forth a fiscal policy that would set aside reserves to meet that future obligation on a 15-year amortization period beginning May 1st, 2015. And I would note that the amount set aside now would already exceed that, so it wouldn't require a change in the fund. The third change is on page 5 of the fiscal policy. It's the area discussing special service areas. Consistent with the Regency Lane Sanitary Sewer Special Service Area that the City Council will consider this evening, we've proposed a few revisions to just reflect current practice. Some minor changes in the maximum period of time, and that there is some more latitude on the City Council's part as to what special service area construction amounts are bonded versus funded internally. And the last proposed revision is on the same page and under revenue guidelines, and just given the state's budget situation, we've offered a suggested revision to just state that in addition to a diverse and stable revenue structure, the city does also endeavor to minimize reliance on state and or federal revenue in order to fund core services. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or just allow you to deliberate on those changes.
A question on the other post-employment benefit costs. Would you detail what those are today?
Yeah, it is a implicit obligation that is related to the fact that retirees can remain on the city's medical and dental insurance plans. And so because they benefit from the lower aged active employees, we have an actuary that must calculate that obligation each year.
And today, what % of total are retired?
The retirees on the health insurance plan it's roughly 82 out of 318, so maybe about a quarter.
Yeah, okay. Do you think that's a fairly common percentage?
I do in this area simply because it's mandatory, and most retirees choose to stay on the city's health and dental plans.
And I guess a related question, stepping a little bit away from this, is the age distribution of active employees for the city comparable to similar cities?
That I would not know. We'd probably need to survey to know that for sure.
Thank you.
Tim?
As it relates to the proposed change on revenue guidelines, Elizabeth, minimize reliance on state and/or federal revenues to fund core services. I assume that we budget in receipts from the state and federal government before each fiscal year.
We do.
So is the idea here to eventually develop budgets that don't include any of those receipts? I mean, how would we minimize ourselves?
It could potentially do that. Right now, we're fortunate in that the state-provided revenues are a very small percentage of the total budget. And so the emphasis here was on core services, being those that are public safety related, public works related, and we're nowhere near that right now.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question. Elizabeth, on average, what is the annual amount of that?
We're about $2.3 million between income tax and motor fuel tax. Those are the two large ones.
What of those two would be at risk? Would most likely be at risk?
Historically, income tax has been the most talked about in Springfield, reducing that distribution to municipalities.
Okay. And how much is that of the total?
That's about 1.6, 1.7 million.
1.6.
And that's in the general fund.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, comments?
One other question on the capital policy. With the bonding amount, excuse me, with the financing amount of 500,000 maximum, is there any implication to lower size bond, smaller amount of bonds? And this might be a question for Tim. Is the market more efficient? Can we issue smaller amounts of bonds for capital as efficiently as larger amounts? Has the limit come down, making the market more efficient, or as a result of the market being more efficient?
What we have done historically with the special service areas is just go directly to a bank and not actually go to market with bonds and just finance them externally, but do it through a negotiated loan with a bank.
Got it.
To avoid just that, significant bond issuance costs, bond rating costs, those types of things for a special service area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2017 fiscal policy.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the fiscal policy for fiscal year 2017 as amended is approved. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is consideration of the fiscal year 2015, is that right? 2015? Treasurer's report.
Yeah, we're in 16, we're closing out 15, we're starting to budget 17.
I just wanted to make sure we weren't a year behind.
No, that actually, we are finishing up the FY15 audit now. You'll have that presented to you at the November 2nd City Council meeting. This is a statutory requirement. This is a document. The format is prescribed, and this is published in the newspaper every year by all municipalities. And so that is why you see the text kind of combined. That's formatted that way to minimize publication costs. However, it does include the mandatory required information that is required under state statute. So we would ask simply that you accept the treasurer's report this evening, but I did want to add that we had a lot of discussion last year about the format and how useful that is. And we were asked to look at potentially allowing this information to be published on the website in a more user-friendly fashion. So unfortunately, it took 42 pages of your packet, but we did take 3 years of vendor payments over $2,500, and we sorted them both alphabetically as well as from the highest dollar amount to the lowest. And those reports are included in your packet. And the intent of that would be to publish that information in that format on the website in addition to the treasurer's report, simply to make it more user-friendly to anyone who might be looking for that type of information. So that is mostly informational, but we did want to make sure that we followed up on the concern that was expressed by the committee last year.
Did I make a suggestion on that? On the published in the newspaper version, which is just streamed out, perhaps ahead of it on top, you would put a reference there in big bold letters that says, for a more user-friendly chart, please see the city's website at such and such, and put a link maybe or something, because a lot of people are reading newspapers online now. And that way, they wouldn't have to waste their time trying to dig through the other presentation.
Sure. We will talk with Lake Forester about having that option added, so.
That wouldn't add very much.
No, it wouldn't add at all.
Elizabeth, thank you. I found it was very helpful. And
Great.
I mean, candidly, just easier to read, but the other is, I guess you could do it with, a magnifying glass or something. But the format that you've created has made it very easy.
Great.
Thank you. And I like the alpha and the amount. It's excellent. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Quick
Yes, ma'am.
question. In the listing by size, did you find any unusual trends or changes that surprised you or that you would bring to our attention?
No, did not.
Thank you.
It's essentially an annual check register.
Yeah.
So we check the check, we look at the check register every month.
Regularly.
I do anyway. It's part of one of the benefits of this position. And so those things are just for everybody's information. The finance chair's duty is to review the actual check register every month. And what I do is exactly what Elizabeth and her team did with this information. I look at it alphabetically, and I also look at it by amount. So you can see, lots of small payments going in a strange direction or large payments going someplace. So, that information is reviewed. The treasurer's report is it's a regulatory requirement, essentially. Any other questions or thoughts on the treasurer's report? Okay, I would entertain a motion to acknowledge receipt of the fiscal year 2015 treasurer's report. This will also be included on our city council agenda later on.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. It has been acknowledged. Next item on our agenda is the 2015 property tax levy estimate, once again presented by Elizabeth Hollop.
This is solely an informational item, but we have begun the process of preparing the property tax levy for the city council's consideration. I've just set forth in the agenda the estimated schedule that we anticipate having with the levy. November 2nd, your city council agenda will have just a levy estimate. That's a requirement under state statute, and it is non-binding. But that will be on your November 2nd agenda. November 16th will be the first reading of the tax levy ordinance. November 19th, we'll publish a notice of public hearing if a public hearing is required. A public hearing is only required if your increase is 5% over the prior year, so we don't anticipate that, but it's a formality. And December 7th would be the second and final reading of the tax levy ordinance. So just for information purposes, I did indicate that the tax levy cap applicable to this year's tax levy is 0.8%. So that's 0.8%. So,
Could you maybe provide a little more explanation about what that cap is? What does that really mean?
sure. It does, the city is not technically bound as a home rule city. However, it self-imposes the tax cap. Right now, it applies to collar counties in Illinois who are non-home rule. It limits the increase in your tax levy each year to the lesser of 5% or the inflationary amount. The inflationary amount is based on the December to December change of the prior year. So this 0.8% is driven by the CPI change from December 13 to December 14. So there does tend to be a lag in that from what you might feel like is happening in the economy currently. So that cap this year is 0.8%. It limits the aggregate levy, not debt service. So it's primarily the operating levies, the pension levies, the sum of that cannot exceed last year's extended levy for those same line items in total by the cap amount.
So this year it'd be 0.8,
Right.
less than 1%.
Right.
So, okay, well, that's an informational item. Do I have any questions, other questions, comments? Okay. So thank you for that review. The next item on our agenda is a resolution authorizing dissolution of the consolidated IMRF employer account for City and School District 67 and authorizing establishment of separate accounts. So if I could quickly explain what that means. Historically, the city and District 67 have had one account with the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund for all the employees of the city and the school district. And is this a GASB? There's a policy decision behind this somewhere, I know, but
Yes, with the implementation of GASB 67 and more importantly GASB 68 next year, those liabilities will begin to be reported on the financial statements rather than in note disclosures. And so the school district was interested in pursuing the possibility of separating those two accounts and standing on their own. And they paid for the actuarial analysis that was developed and is included in your packet. And in doing so, each account would stand on their own. The contribution rates would be determined based on the salaries and years of service for the employees included in that particular account.
okay. So instead of having one pool for city and District 67 employees in the Municipal Retirement Fund, there will now be two separate accounts, one for the city and one for District 67 employees. So, and maybe you could speak a little bit to any impact that might have financially.
Sure. As expected, we knew that there was going to be a slight differential in the rates. So in aggregate, if it was all still combined, the actuary calculated an employer rate for 2016 of 12.43%. So that would mean that both the city and the school district would contribute 12.43% of the covered payroll for all employees in IMRF. With the proposed dissolution and establishment of the separate accounts, the city would see a slight increase in their employer rate for 2016 from 12.43 to 12.61. And the school district would see a decrease in their rate from 12.43 to 11.53%. And that differential occurs because their covered payroll salaries are lower than the city's and their years of service are less. So we have longer tenured, higher paid employees, and that's why there's a difference in rate.
And can you quantify that in dollars, perhaps?
Sure. Our contribution for 2016 with the city and the library combined would be about $1.6 million. That differential between 12.43 and 12.61 would amount to $23,000. So a very small, it's about a 1.44% increase.
And with respect to the reporting requirements that are coming down the pike, are we in agreement that it's a better way of presenting them than, but it has this modest additional cost to us and corresponding slight savings to the school district, so.
It will make it much easier for GASB 67 and 68 reporting, but another aspect for it is that School District 67 will also have more autonomy to make their own decisions about benefits and programs that they can offer within IMRF. Right now, they can only do what the city offers. So when the city offered ERI, School District 67 had to offer ERI. And so conversely, they could elect to make that decision on their own at a future point because they would not be incumbent upon what the city's decision is.
And just for everybody's knowledge, ERI was the early retirement
Incentive.
incentive that was in place with the city for a few years and was very successful in terms of giving people opportunities to move on in their lives and
Reduce cost.
adjusting our staffing and cost levels. So, so I guess this is a resolution, so we would need to recommend city council approval of the proposed resolution, which will also be discussed later. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The council is hereby recommended by the Finance Committee to approve. The next item on our agenda is health and dental insurance primer. Deshay Kalmar is going to give us a little lesson in health insurance and dental coverage, which I think several of us asked for because the language gets a little arcane and
It's everybody's favorite topic, I know.
I noticed you kept your presentation brief.
I did. And I'll talk fast.
Don't do that. Speak
okay,
slowly, but
okay.
briefly.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, as mentioned at the March committee meeting, you did request the primer or an overview on our health insurance. Since this is such a big part of the annual budget, as we move into the budget process for FY17, I hope that this will provide an overview on what we have and the proactive steps that we've taken through the years to control costs and to be in compliance with a very rapidly changing field. We have been self-insured since 1980. From 1980 to July of 99, we were in a self-insured cooperative, and in July of 1999, we became self-insured on our own. We have a benefits consultant who works with us, and his role is to do analysis and pricing of our plans. He issues RFPs and receives quotes from providers and negotiates prices on the city's behalf. He stays abreast of trends in the field, and he assists us in developing strategy as we move forward. He provides education and guidance for our Employee Benefit Committee, as well as for the PCA Committee and the City Council as a whole. And then finally, aside from the health and dental aspect of things, he advises on our liability insurance from time to time, and also on legislative issues and the impact of certain proposed legislation. The City Council authorized the city to work with an employee benefit committee back in 2003. We have representatives from each area of the city, primarily first-line employees, non-management employees on this committee. And that has been an incredibly successful process for us in making benefit design changes. It's created a high level of employee education, and that has contributed to the success of our plans. The Affordable Care Act, everybody's heard about it, read about it. Some hope it goes away. Probably it's not totally going to go away. Who knows? That does a few things for us. It limits us on how much cost sharing we can put back on the employees. It also requires that we provide certain unlimited essential benefits, primarily in the wellness area. And then it has expanded services. It also comes with some insurance carrier regulatory oversight, and it has expanded coverages in a couple of areas. A few years back, the first one that hit was allowing dependents to stay on until age 26. We actually had that a year before the Affordable Care Act did it because the state of Illinois had required it a year prior to that. And then What hit this year in January was the requirement that certain part-time employees be offered health insurance. That if we consider them part-time employees if they hit a certain work level, though, as defined by the Act, then we had to offer them coverage. I forgot to mention, too, on that last one, the most important part, there's extensive reporting that has to be done. We've finance has worked in through the last several years some of the more modest reporting things. The big one is really going to hit in January of 2016. It's going to be quite labor intensive, I think. We are upgrading our financial system this weekend, as a matter of fact, to help us do this reporting. And once that gets upgraded, we'll see exactly how much work we're going to have to all put in entering data and making sure it complies with what we have to do in January of 2016. We have what impacts our healthcare costs, demographics do. We cover about 700 lives, just slightly shy of 700 lives on our insurance plans. The average age on the plans is 36.6 years. Seems like an odd choice, but remember, as mentioned earlier by Elizabeth, we're covering from retirees to newborns. So that all averages out to 36.6 years. And we also tend to be the primary insurance providers for our employees. That is very typical of most municipalities, not just here. We do have our retirees on the plan, which is something that the private sector does not have to deal with. It is a statutory requirement through the state of Illinois. That makes it difficult for us to get insurance underwriters to look at us. They don't like having retirees on the plan, so it becomes difficult for them to give us decent quotes. We also have some collective bargaining limitations. We do have to negotiate changes. Everyone who has, whether public or private, whether you have, if you have unions, you do have to negotiate those types of changes. However, the difference is in the public sector, if we don't come to an agreement on our contract, then it is sent to an interest arbitration. And we don't have a choice on that. Again, that's statutory. So it is taken out of our hands and placed in an arbitrator's hands. Other things that impact us are the consolidation of providers and care. That means reduced choices and reduced competition. If you look at Lake Forest Hospital, they've now joined with Northwestern, so they're Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital. Highland Park is now University Hospital of Highland Park. You also have physicians who are joining groups. They're either aligning with Northwestern, Advocate, North Shore. In this area, a lot of them are either Northwestern or North Shore. So that means you're funneling to different areas. With the passage of the Affordable Care Act, we have changes in the regulatory environment for health plans. Because we're self-funded, we have greater flexibility in terms of what we offer in our plan designs. We also pay significantly lower taxes on the plans. Our approach has been to carefully consider our options and utilize the benefit committee process to introduce changes to the work group. That, frankly, has helped us considerably in not having problems when I go to negotiate those collective bargaining agreements, because they are aware, they feel like they've had some input through their benefit committee representatives into what we're doing. So that's been incredibly helpful and very effective for us. We've always been proactive in finding ways to contain costs or to get ahead of trends. The work that the benefit committee has been doing for that purpose has been very successful. In 2013, They propose that as of January 2014, we implement a high deductible health savings account plan as an additional plan. That in part was to appeal to our underage 65 retirees, so our younger retirees who are on the plan, as well as to the part-time staff that we were going to have to offer insurance to in 2015. They've been working this year to again consider a number of strategies to control costs, to increase employee education and awareness and wellness. I'm really quite excited. I'm not going to talk to you about it tonight because we're meeting with the PCA committee next week, but I'm really excited about some of the options that we're going to be proposing and bringing forward from the committee. Through the years, the committee process, has been instrumental in maintaining positive employee relations and their understanding of the plan. And it's also been a key component, as I mentioned, of working with the employees through the collective bargaining process. We're meeting next week with the PCA committee, and after we hash through things with them, then we will be coming forward with more information and more details for the City Council, for the Finance Committee. So does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
With the massive amount of data that has to be prepared and the repository that has to be built for compliance and reporting, but also for ongoing administration, do you envision that each employee is responsible for their own data? Or is someone in your department or in finance or some other function responsible for verification and accuracy of employee data?
Well, we do have to provide the data, and we have to report it, and we have to provide the forms to the employees. So we haven't quite gotten to that next step yet, but I imagine if they find that there are errors in it, they would let us know. But we do have to provide it initially to them.
Where I'm going is, is it possible that, maybe not at the first go, but on an ongoing basis, that if each employee is responsible for their own data, does that perhaps improve efficiency in maintaining that data and reporting?
Possibly, yeah. We're just getting this upgrade. We don't even know exactly what it's going to do in the computer system yet. Diane and I met last week to talk about that. So I think once we actually see it, get our hands on it, then we'll have a better idea of where we need to go, what we need to do. And also our third-party administrator who handles our claims for us, we're hoping that they can provide us with a certain amount of the data as well from their systems.
And that would be an automated exchange?
Yes.
I would anticipate, yeah. Great,
I hope so.
yeah.
So,
Other questions? I actually have a couple.
Okay.
I've been hiding in my back pocket. Going back to your first slide, if you wouldn't mind. You say we have been self-insured since July 1999, and actually prior to that, in a consortium. Could you briefly just describe for everybody out there what that means?
basically what it means is we are the insurance company. We design our policies and our plans. We do tend to follow law, and we've always tended to follow state law, even though some things we didn't have to. It just was easier, the state requirements. But we have a third-party administrator who processes claims. We have a contract with a PPO network so that we get preferred provider networks. We also,
And which one do we use? Just,
right now, we're using Cigna.
okay.
Not Cigna, the insurance, but Cigna, the PPO network, their PPO network of providers. Prior to that, we used PHCS, so that's where we are at the moment. We also have excess liability coverage, which we get through ING Voya. some people refer to it as stop-loss coverage. So whenever claims hit a certain dollar amount, which in this case, the PCA committee and the city council has set at $125,000, then we get reimbursed for everything over that. So we have a limit on our liability.
So when you say we're self-insured, just so that everybody understands, it's the equivalent of having a high deductible for the city?
Yes.
And at some point, you hit your deductible, and then it goes to the insurance company. There is an insurance company behind this. We are not carrying unlimited liability for all of our employees'
Correct.
health services. Which is
Correct.
a point that I think when you say self-insured, I think alarm bells go off in people's heads that there's this huge risk, and that risk is managed by this, what they call excess liability coverage, which is simply, that's where the insurance kicks in. It's just a higher number, and we carry more of the lower level routine kinds of claims risk as an obligation of the city,
That's right.
because it's less expensive to do, because of our population characteristics.
To be
or what have you?
self-insured? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I assume that that's why we do this.
Yes, and we have much more control over what we do as well. Our quotes that we've gotten from, like, the Blue Crosses of the world, they aren't necessarily all that good, so.
And then when you determine what, I know that the Employee Benefit Committee has a role to play in what the exact options for the employees look like, and what's covered and what's not, and what levels of deductibles and so forth. Is that in any way driven by this liability insurance carrier that's standing behind us to protect us from large claims, or is that driven by the market, or is it recommended to us by Right Benefit Strategies, or how do we decide what the options that the employees have are going to be?
Are you talking about individual things that might be covered, or the different plans that we have?
Well, typically, employees are going to have a choice of 2 or 3 different ways of paying for their medical care and getting
Right.
medical insurance with different characteristics. Some people are going to want a PPO where they can pick and choose whatever doctors they want within the network. Others are going to want more of an HMO kind of thing where it's set doctors, set locations. Some may want a health savings account.
Right.
How do those plans get designed? Obviously, there's some input from the employees, which is critical, but
Right. Well, prior to 2003, we had one plan, which is your basic PPO plan, and then we had a fully insured HMO on the side, which virtually nobody took. In 2003, we worked with the benefit committee and with our consultants' sort of guidance. We actually redesigned our health plans and offered some different options, one of which is a high deductible plan with a health reimbursement account, which is a little different than a health savings account, but with a health reimbursement account option, and then the traditional PPO. And that's what we've gone along with, and we've tweaked it through the years. The benefit committee works with Peter Wright, and there's certain things that they can and can't get into as far as coverages are concerned. Really, they look at out-of-pocket expenses, co-pays, that sort of thing typically. They've looked at our PPO network, and it's really us presenting, if we change to this network, we'll save X amount of dollars and you'll only lose a few doctors or whatever. So that's really how that has come along. They then added, working with Peter Wright, they kind of designed, and it was really based on the Affordable Care Act and the basic coverages that they require. This basic plan that we added last year, or it went into effect in January of this year. So they're having input, they go back to their work groups and come back with suggestions, or they bounce things off their work group and come back with feedback. But they're being highly educated on all of this stuff. It's not a fast process, I will tell you, to work through a committee like that, but it's been very helpful to us. And so they really have kind of designed the 3 plans that we have.
Alderman Penley, on the other thing I would add is back in 2003, I think it was then Alderman Rummel, who was in the business, the insurance business, worked closely with Peter Wright, and I believe Alderman Morsch was also involved in that at the same time. So members of the city council also played an instrumental role in designing those plans.
And they have to get updated from time to time, but, okay. And then the last question I had was, you mentioned the Cadillac tax, which I know we've all read about, but I'm not sure very many people understand exactly what it is and what it means to the employees and to the city. So if you could give us a little background on that. And
The Cadillac tax will kick in, if you will, in 2018, unless there are changes. And it is a 40% excise tax over the cost. And I'm sorry, I don't know the dollar limit off the top of my head, but if our plan costs hit a dollar limit, the premiums, if you will, hit a certain dollar limit in 2018, then that 40% excise tax kicks in over on any dollar amount over that limit. Now, we get a little bit higher limit because we have police and public safety. They kicked it up a little bit higher for that. But we do anticipate that our traditional plan will hit that. We are going to be recommending, I'll get into the weeds a little bit, we are going to be recommending that that plan sunset and go away in 2017, that it freeze for 2016 enrollment, and that it go away in 2017.
so the tax is a tax that kicks in based on the amount that the employer and the employee are paying?
Together, yes.
It's not on it's not a benefits-related thing, it's a cost.
It's cost.
So basically what they're saying is if you provide a plan to your employees that is deemed by the government to be too generous or too costly, I guess more too costly, they don't really care about how generous it is, they just
Right.
care about how costly it is. They're gonna tax who? The employer, the employee?
There's still some debate on that, whether you can pass that along to the employee or not. So I don't think that's fully been answered.
So it's a way of managing overall premiums, which will play itself out, I have to assume, in coverage. Because
also
the costs
think-
are what they are.
Right. They also are saying it's very important that not be taken away, because that's how they're intending to help pay for the Affordable Care Act and the marketplace plans.
So it's a low limit. I mean, your Cadillac plan is not really necessarily Cadillac, it's something that's deemed to be, it's a level that's set based on their ability to collect the tax and pay for other things. Okay, interesting. I
It's a
honestly didn't
Buick,
understand it
George.
until now.
It's a Buick.
Yeah, well, it's Chevy, maybe?
Yeah, a little higher.
But I mean, it's interesting to
Someplace
think.
in between.
I honestly didn't understand it. I've tried to read
Oh,
up on
yeah,
it. It's, when you read about this in the press, it's completely gobbledygook.
I think it's around 22,000 annually, isn't it, Deshay?
It is, I think we get up a little higher, though, 24, 25, something like that, because of having the public safety on there.
Okay.
There's a separate cap for the high risk.
And that's the combined premium that's paid? So if the employer and the employer are splitting it, and you said, what, $22,000, something like that?
Yeah.
Let's say it's 24 to make the numbers easy. It would
Right.
be $1,000 a month from the employer and the employee, and I think probably a lot of us are paying quite a bit more than that right now, if we go and look. So be prepared.
It is, though, just on the amount that's over that cap. So if the cap is 24,000 and ours is 25,000, it's only on that $1,000 gap that the 40% excise tax.
But it's 40% of that number.
It is 40%,
So that'd be $400
right,
on your example.
yes.
So, I mean, this is gonna, people are gonna notice this when it happens. So, that's it for me. I'm sorry to belabor the conversation
Oh,
here, but.
that's good information.
Other questions? Okay, there being none, thank you very much, Deshay. And the next item on our agenda is other business, just a quick reference to the flash report. And budget follow-up item report that we were given, are there any questions or comments about that? There were a number of items in the budget that were to be followed up on that were sort of laid out for us. No questions there? Okay. So that is there any other business that, I think that this has been a lengthy enough conversation. We probably don't need to have any other business. And the last item, or the next to last item before adjournment, is an opportunity for the public to address the Finance Committee. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak to the Finance Committee, recognizing that the Finance Committee doubles as the City Council and will be reconvening in about 10 minutes to have a regular City Council meeting? Okay, there being none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
It's 7:17. Council will begin promptly at 7:25.